Now, the newly appointed chair of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Social Change, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana of the South African Council of Churches, joins us now to speak about the committee and its objectives. In the coming months, South Africa loosens lockdown regulations while still facing an approaching peak in infections. It's against this backdrop we look at what the committee can do. A very good evening to you, Bishop, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Congratulations on your appointment. What is the purpose of the committee exactly? How should we as South Africans understand what you're hoping to achieve?
Well, the virus is upon us all, and it's not a temporal gift. It is here for some time. And because of that, we understand that it therefore calls for different ways of being South African, different ways of living, and different ways of interacting, and different ways of doing business. We have learned in a couple of months not to shake hands. We have learned to wear masks. We have learned to stay apart from each other, something that is a serious challenge for those who are blind because they cannot tell how far they are from you, and they depend a lot on the sense of touch for their mobility and their everything. So that means there is social change already in place. In the home here, we're beginning to think differently about what do you do when you arrive at home after you've been away. So the point here is to say we need all of South African society in their various formations to think seriously about what kind of things we need to do differently. And I think the purpose of the committee is to look at that from all the vantage points of South African society and be able to say to government, this and that you can facilitate in that way and that way. But ultimately, the responsibility lies with each one of us that because I care for you, I will be in solidarity with you. I will make sure that I prevent anything that might have you infected. And that is the way we need to look at this as society. So that's really our job, is to talk amongst ourselves and say, what do we see that needs adjustment in our everyday life? And how can that be facilitated by communication, promotion, propagation, and maybe what government can do to make it easier for us?
As a society implies some sort of unity, some homogeneous approach, and COVID-19 has really showed us how different we are, how unequal we are. And it's also highlighted some of the fissures in our society. I mean, if we look at gender-based violence, for instance, the solidarity movements for, Black Lives Matters, how then do you take such a fractured society and get them to work together?
Well, having mentioned the base violence, let me start right there. Tomorrow is supposed to be Father's Day. And just for example, we are all part, this Council of Churches is part of a coalition that's supporting stronger gender justice in promoting a pledge that men should make. That in itself is a social change, that men should take responsibility for ensuring that gender-based violence is not perpetrated where they are. And so that is a social change issue. And we have said, and Minister Zulu has mentioned this in her brief to the committee, that one of the things we just need to be thinking about, if we're talking about social change, what are all the things that need to change? Now, you mentioned something about inequalities. Now, inequalities is probably it's a kind of a nicer way of saying there are people that are living with deep poverty. And that poverty, again, you're going to say the face of poverty in our society is women. And therefore, if you're talking about social change, what things can change for women to have a greater economic capacity so that their social dependency can become less and less? That's a social change issue. And I do not know how much of this is doable in the interaction between our committee and government. But then, of course, you talk about people needing to move. I mean, mobility of people is always intertwined with economic realities. All the social things that we're talking about are related to that. Now, I remember that in Pondoland, there is a song that used to be sung that says, Indo tengena ngomo, my big Johannesburg, Lisiko eli dala, my choving golovan. That means if you don't have cattle, you must go to Johannesburg to work. Now, if I'm going to do that, I need to think COVID. What can be done to ensure that that young man, that young woman, instead of fleeing rural poverty into urban squalor and greater COVID, they can stay where they are and the economy can facilitate their living in that environment. All of these things have to do, therefore, with how you change your social reality.
And just a final question, and perhaps you can also speak on what you hopefully personally bring to the table in doing this. When we talk about social distance, there really is in the society of ours. We're still trying to complete a transformative agenda that has long been on the table. But I'm wondering, because of COVID-19, as you said, we are now further distanced. How are we going to bring about that social change? Because often it's forced on us, Bishop, because people are in our space. So is COVID-19 going to possibly be a blessing in that way, or is it going to be a curse?
COVID-19 is it's almost like, I was talking about this just last week in the day in which we were inaugurated, that it was actually June the 16th. And I was saying that June the 16th is a beacon. It's a marker that you talk about pre-June the 16th and post-June the 16th. You can say the same about COVID. COVID is a game changer for everyone. There will be a pre-COVID and a post-COVID. Now, the post-COVID obviously has got all these distances, but we are also saying that because COVID showed up the underbelly and how, in fact, not only are we equal in the sense that not anybody can die from COVID, but we're also so unequal that we're unsustainable. And therefore, a post-COVID environment has got to be the one that says, how do you make everybody better able to live in this environment? If it means you got to deal with the fact that people live in dense populations, those dense populations have got to be spread out. Therefore, you need to give the opportunity for a better life for people. If pit latrines and all the things that we live within rural areas are unsafe for COVID, what are we going to do differently? So the whole system of investing in the quality of life has to change. And that's what we mean, at least as far as I understand it, has to be part of the agenda for changing, the social habits and behavior.
So basically, Bishop, as you're saying, to quote the man behind you in that picture, Nelson Mandela, it is in our hands. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That there is the chairperson on the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Social Change, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana.